And I'll share this one single slide right now. That's perfect. That should work much better. Okay, so I just want to say thank you everyone for being here. We are so excited that you joined our Virginia Women and HPC. My name is Gladys Andino. I am with UVA Research Computing, and I am one of the founders and chair of the program. And today with me, we have Eric Walter from William & Mary, and he's going to be the moderator for this panel. We also have some of our committee members here present. We have Carol Parish from Richmond, Jayashree Sharma from Mason, George Mason. We have Helen from VCU. And who else I'm missing? Is Mark already here, or Alana? They are from, Mark is from VTech, and with Virginia UVA, we have 3 of us. Michelle Koch is out in a very well-deserved vacation today, and also we have Karsten Sealer, and they are all part of the committee. And with that, I just want to emphasize that Virginia Women in High Performance Computing is committed to increasing diversity, equity, and inclusion by promoting and encouraging the participation and equal representation of women in HPC and other technological fields. And we are so excited to have you here. If you want to find out more about our program or want to become, a member, just please let us know. Feel free to reach out. And with that, I'm going to give the room to Eric, which is going to be the moderator for our panel today. Eric.
All right. Thank you, Gladys. Does everyone hear me okay? I assume. So I want to thank all the speakers for agreeing to come and present today. Our first speaker is Jackie Milhans. Jackie is the Associate Director of Northwestern Research Computing Services. She serves on a number of committees and working groups, including recently serving as co-lead for the EDUCAUSE Research Computing and Data Community Group. She's co-founder and co-chair of the Northwestern IT Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Steering Committee, and is co-chair for the PERC 21 Program Committee. And just a little more background, she completed her PhD in Material Science and Engineering at the Georgia Institute of Technology and a BS in Material Science at Carnegie Mellon, and a postdoc at Los Alamos National Laboratory. So with that, please, Jackie, again, I will raise my hand at 10 minutes.
Thanks very much for the introduction. Thanks, Gladys, for the invitation. Thank you all for being here. Please feel free to put questions in the chat. I might have a delay to answer as I'm going through my 10 minutes about myself, but or just come off mute, but I'm happy to take questions. I have some slides, so I'll go ahead. There's 2 slides, but I'm going to be talking through them as I go. So let me just go ahead and put this in presenter mode. And if you all can give me a thumbs up when you're seeing slides. Okay, it looks okay. Great. Okay, so
why don't I present it more right now? That's what we see on our screen.
Thank you for letting me know. Hang on. Let me see if I can move it here. How about now?
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. Okay. Let me open these chats here. Okay, so I'm going to spend a lot of time on this slide. I really just kind of wanted to go through my background. As Eric mentioned, I'm the Associate Director of Research Computing Services at Northwestern University. So that essentially means that I oversee data science, data management, and high performance computing services at Northwestern University. I spend a lot of my time making sure that my staff have what they need to be able to support the research community at Northwestern. and partnering with faculty, research deans, and leaders across Northwestern to make sure that we know what researchers need and we're filling those needs for them. So I started out as I was a military kid. That's me, the little one here, with my parents, my grandparents, my uncle, my sister. And so this is us in Okinawa. I am not Japanese, by the way. I'm half Korean and half white, but a lot of people think that I'm half Japanese when I show this photo, but I am not. So I spent the first few years of my life traveling quite a bit as an Army kid, and then spent most of my time growing up in central Massachusetts, on a military base there and then off base. The reason why I mentioned my experience as a military kid is because I had the chance to live among a very diverse community and tight-knit community. I think there are, unless you kind of grow up in that community, you don't often realize how diverse a military base really is. And so I was exposed to people who did not look like me. We spent a lot of time in each other's homes, and because in military housing, it's essentially kind of like townhouses, you could think of them. So you're all kind of connected in smaller homes, and we had a playground in the middle of kind of a square of those kinds of buildings. And so we built a lot of friendships across different cultures. And when I moved off base, it was totally different in central Massachusetts. Boston is very diverse, central Massachusetts, maybe not so much. And it was very different. A lot of people couldn't tell me and my sister apart. They couldn't tell us apart from, the handful of other Asian girls in the school. And so it was really different. And I'm glad that I moved off base before I went to college, because it did prepare me for other life experiences. And, especially being in a STEM field, you're one of a few, right? So after I did my bachelor's at Carnegie Mellon in material science, and I minored in computer science. And I think, at the time, I think it was less than 20% women at CMU. So anyway, there was often times where, I would be in a lecture hall where there was maybe 4 women in that. And so it was a challenge, I think, especially when I had labs, getting a lab partner. Oftentimes they would assume that, I didn't know my stuff. And I did an REU, or research experience, for undergrad at Georgia Tech. And I really liked the faculty there. I clicked really well with them. So I decided to go there for grad school. So this is me with my advisor, graduation. And he was really wonderful. He really saw a lot of potential in me. And this was one of I had a few mentors at CMU, but being able to work so closely with a single person, I think, was really helpful for me in my career, because during that time, I also did work in Paris at a school there. And then I did a lot of work at a national lab out in Washington State. And, he helped me navigate through all of that. And anytime I was like, I don't really want to do this, or I can't do this, he was like, you're going to get it done. You're going to do it. And you're the only person in this group that can do it. So you're going to be the person to do it. And it just really helped me see what I could do. And so, having that kind of person in my career, I realized how important it is for someone to show you how to do things. He didn't show me how to apply for jobs or write a resume. And that probably, I could have used the Career Center for that. So if you have those resources available to you, I would use them if you can. That was a mistake on my part. But I did my postdoc at Los Alamos in New Mexico. And so this is a photo of my daily walk with my dog in New Mexico. And New Mexico is very different from the East Coast. It was gorgeous. I loved camping, backpacking out there and hiking quite a bit. Los Alamos was very white male and skewed very much older. And so I really didn't fit in terms of what people like to do after work. And frankly, a lot of things were closed in Los Alamos or Santa Fe where I lived. Everything closed down at 9, and I was in my 20s, and that is really not, it wasn't a fit for me. And so it was, I had a couple mentors there, but not really strong ones. And that was maybe unique to the group that I worked in, because I was in weapons. It was very, people had been there for quite a long time. It was US citizens, and therefore kind of pared down the diversity that I was used to in grad school and in undergrad. And so I was like, well, I learned a lot there. It wasn't for me. The other thing working at Los Alamos in the area that I was in is that you publish into a black box for the most part. And so if I wasn't going to be a lifer there, I had to get out in order to be able to have my work, so that I could talk about my work. So I was recruited actually for a position at Northwestern. All of my research in my PhD and my postdoc involved computation. It had a computational aspect, especially, and my postdoc was entirely computational. So that's where I learned everything, and probably like many of you, I learned it on my own, right? You just kind of like are given a script or something to run, and people are like, just run it. This code was written by a bunch of people. I had a computer science background from my undergrad. So I was also able to write code, and I wrote a bunch of software. And so that's how I got into high performance computing as a career. So a recruiter called me and said, hey, we need someone who can talk to people and at Northwestern and not only sit behind a computer, but also know what's going on, help people use the system. So I also really did not like publishing or writing grants. It just wasn't, I was totally into the tech side of things. So I said, great, this is a career where it's a 9 to 5. I really like to travel and take time off. And so it had the time off that I needed. And also a lot of the stuff that I am good at. And I enjoy engaging with people. And if you want me to build relationships, absolutely, I'll do that. So, so it was a good career move for me. And then since then, I was in a senior computational specialist role, which is essentially just helping people use is that 10 minutes, Eric?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Okay, so I'll just quickly go through that. So I moved up, and about 4 promotions later, I became associate director. So I really have a lot of my extracurriculars, that I call them, my professional organization engagements, friends like Gladys, who open up doors for you and also can see what you can do. I have a boss who I've been reporting to at Northwestern that this entire time, and he has always brought me up and pushed me forward, and having someone challenge you and telling you can do more, but also backing off when you need it, has been really helpful. So now my future is essentially just establishing what my priorities are. Flexibility. I need time off. I got 2 small kids that you can see there. This is somehow the best photo of my family, so I apologize for the tongue out, but they're 2 and 4. So, managed expectations. And, what do I care about? And can I get paid to do that? who's benefiting me by doing this, and who's benefiting by me doing this. Is it me or the organization or someone else? So those are things that I think of when I think about what my future plans are. And I just wanted to quickly end with this next slide and just leave you with this, is that you don't have to tackle everything. You can, I like thinking of things as an orchestra. What's your skill or talent? Are you playing the violin? Are you doing the timpanis? Are you the conductor? Are you simply the stage? Because I used to think that I had to do everything that I cared about alone, and working with people has really helped me focus on what I'm good at and also make time for myself. So with that, I will end.
All right,
Apologies.
well, no, thank you, Jackie. We have time for maybe one or two quick questions. If somebody wants to just start talking or raise their hand, I can call on you. There is one. Oh, that's a clap.
I have a
So
quick question.
Yeah.
Jackie, what language did you do your computational work in?
Fortran and C and C++. So I am not like the young folks now that are, doing Python and stuff. I can read it. I could write it if you need me to, probably, but yeah, I'm a Fortran girl.
Old school.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us are in the same boat. I have a quick question. I just was curious, since if you look back at the beginning of your career, like as far as being a woman in this field, what has gotten better? How much has gotten better? And is there anything that's actually gotten worse since you started?
Yeah. So what has gotten better is that there's more of us. And, I think that I love seeing men engaged in this space and learning and sharing the stage or giving the stage. One of the things that I think that we're continuing to work on is decentering kind of who we've always centered and thought about, and thinking of women as somebody to benefit traditional HPC, and thinking about what do women need, probably another woman on the team, right? Instead of, if you read the book, why do all the Black kids sit together in the cafeteria, something like that. It's a really interesting book, and it just shows, you need a community of women. If you're going to have a woman on the team, they need support. They're going to work better if they don't have to be the only one. And the thing that's maybe it gotten worse is kind of, so I think it's a continual change, and I think we're changing at a faster rate than we ever have, and I think that it creates some distraction and polarization sometimes of views, and I don't mean in a political sense, but like, what is the exact right way to do this, and what, can we make a mistake? And I think that's the scary thing, is people are afraid to make a mistake. But you know what? You're probably making a mistake when you're coding. You're making a mistake when you're doing scripts for a system or implementing something new. Just own it, apologize, move forward. And I think it's a really scary thing. But sure, I've stepped in it many times. But if I stopped, then that would be, a really unfortunate thing, and it puts all the work on everybody else. So I'm just really happy to see so many people engaged here, and I am really hopeful that we'll just continue to get better.
All right, well, thank you. And with that, we will move to our second speaker, Lara Tim, and she is an HPC engineer at the Advanced Computer Engineering Center for High Performance Computing in South Africa. And the title of her talk is Finding Your Fit in HPC, an Early Career Perspective. And I'll, in the interest of time, I will not read her bio. So please go ahead, Lara, when you're ready.
Hi, sure, no problem. So just, I'm Lara. I have a background in not HPC or computing. So I started my shall we say, undergraduate studies doing architecture, and then moved into the field of electrical engineering and biomedical engineering, and that's sort of the trajectory I followed. I finished studying the beginning of 2021 my master's in biomedical engineering at the University of Cape Town, where my project was the design of an open source prosthetic arm. So absolutely nothing to do with high performance computing or the research computing field. But I was fortunate in that I was offered an undergraduate bursary from South Africa's a large research company in South Africa called the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. And in an effort to remain in Cape Town after I finished my degree, I found the only place that the CSIR had a branch in Cape Town happened to be the Center for High Performance Computing, which I entered by going in and saying, hi, listen, I'm really looking for a job in Cape Town. I'm really interested in learning, you know, is there any opportunity for someone like me in this space? And there was interest, and they were interested in the fact that I was interested in learning. And I was very fortunate that I fell into the HPC space without any prior experience in it and any prior knowledge. And they were very willing to teach me from zero upwards in the field. So that's sort of how I ended up in the field. Since I've been here in the last 16, 17 months, I have done a number of things which have been really terrifying and interesting. And I still feel completely at a loss most days in terms of the field of HPC, just because I think for someone who, and everyone really, who didn't study this per se, it's a very steep learning curve that I found. And also it was COVID. So that was really tricky, working fully remotely, entering the space as the newest member of an established team, but working fully remotely. So that was one of the biggest sort of challenges that I found coming into the space. But since then, as I was saying, I've done a number of things. Mostly, I would say my biggest feat to date has just been talking about my experience as a newcomer in the field of HPC. So I presented on a panel of SC21 for organizational expectations. This year at ISC was invited, and I presented a poster on early career speaker, talking about my experience as my first year in the field of high performance computing. And I'm here because Gladys was very kindly my mentor for that poster preparation and for my lightning talk. And in terms of the things that I am interested in the field, I think there are so many various things that are needed in terms of skill sets, and in terms of, there's a lot of space for people who aren't necessarily computational individuals. So what our group does, which I really enjoy and that I found to be incredibly valuable, is we do many HCD and outreach opportunities and projects. So one, which is the idea is to improve visibility of HPC in South Africa in undergraduate students, is our student cluster competition. So this acts as an entry into the winners of our student cluster competition go to ISC and perform internationally, but there are a number of rounds, and it is predominantly a teaching opportunity where we teach basic HPC skills and theory and that sort of thing to undergraduate students from various underprivileged universities in South Africa, and they have chance to build their own clusters and to work on that hardware. And it's a really wonderful opportunity for them to come and to experience HPC in a way that many other people would never have the opportunity to do, but at sort of an early career stage. And in addition to that, one of our big projects in our lab is the HPC ecosystems project, which I'm also very interested in and thoroughly enjoy, where we take decommissioned hardware from places like TAC and EPCC, and we make small clusters and we redistribute this hardware to various universities and at research places within Africa. So we have a number of sites, I think 15 or 16 sites at the moment, and we give them a small cluster. So for example, half a rack of Stampede And we train sysadmins and we train users on how to use this hardware and how they can use HPC for their own research within their research institutions. So I found that as much as I've enjoyed the field of HPC, I've really enjoyed the outreach and the people aspect of it. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for that. So yeah, the last thing that I sort of have prepared for this is that I just wanted to talk a little bit about my plans and where I'm hoping to go with this in this field. And at this early stage, it's difficult to know, but I think that I'm very interested in the technologies. I'm interested in how modern technologies can be implemented in HPC, like cloud and containerization and all sorts of those type things. But I think that the most interesting thing for me has been engaging with people on different ways of doing things. And I feel like there's a lot that I can still learn. And in that process, by gaining the specialized knowledge, there's a lot that I can share with other people. And I think that for me is the most exciting thing about being in this very niche field. And I suppose this is a topic about a talk about diversity. But I haven't found in my experience, so I think maybe it is a result of me having only sort of studied and finished studying quite recently. Even in my undergraduate engineering degree, I didn't find that there were very few women in our course. I never felt like a minority as a woman in our engineering undergraduate. And even in my experience coming into the field of HPC within our research group and within our offices, I haven't necessarily felt or been made to feel like a minority group in any way. If I look at the demographic, I do note that there are more men than women, but I think that the efforts and the stuff that is in place to make people feel included and improve inclusivity in our group has been very good. So yeah, that's what I have to say.
Thank you, Lara. Well, we definitely have time for a question or two, if anyone has one. A lot of claps, any hands?
Yes, I have a quick question for Laura, Eric, and just she and I had an opportunity to talk before a little bit, but Laura, what is the thing that got you more excited about HPC as you jump into the field, right? What is the thing that is making you feel like I think I can have a career here. This is something that I can do. What is the aspect that has kept you or wants to keep you in?
I think more than anything, I like that it's something that not a lot of people know about. I don't know if it feels a little bit like I'm an insider in something that isn't very very broad, but also that there's so much that I can still learn, but also that I can share. I'm completely sort of motivated by and driven by the idea of knowledge sharing and being able to empower others through knowledge. And I think that for me is what keeps me coming back every day and just being excited about the future growth and where I can go in this field.
That's perfect. And I am so glad to hear that. And the fact that, you as the younger generation, right, that you feel like at least in that the geographical area where you are, right, that you haven't felt that, void of feeling, I am this minority. And that's, it's great to hear, right? We know we have a lot of work to get done still in so many other areas, but, that hearing that from you is like, okay, we're doing something right then. Thank you so much for answering, Lara.
All right, we have time for another question. Okay, well, I definitely have a question, and this is something I'm curious about all the speakers that they could comment on in the end discussion. I was just curious, what at your local institution, I mean, what do you do to sort of try to recruit women and minorities? I mean, do you have a large program? Are there certain hiring practices you follow? Just in general, I'm just very curious about that myself.
So I'm definitely not the right person to speak to about that in terms of our group, but there definitely are practices in place in terms of the demographic of staff that I hired. I was fortunate in that I entered the program as in a role as a graduate in training role, so a graduate role, because of my bursary in my undergraduate. And I think that very specifically that group where the idea is pipeline development for research in South Africa, that's the primary focus. My bursary was awarded to me based on women in STEM. And so there's a lot of room for that and a lot of efforts being made towards that in South African research in general, but I can't say specifically about hiring policies and what is being followed and implemented for us.
I can talk a bit about on our team, what we do is a lot of the common things you've probably learned about is removing all of the preferred qualifications. Do you really need a PhD working for you? Do you need someone to be doing a million things? And so taking the kitchen sink type approach out and really, I mean, there's probably 4 main things that you want this person to do. And then, if you can choose between that, having a rubric that we grade, and we have everybody on the interview committee fill it out. Everybody gets asked the same questions. Sure, there are going to be some variations, like, everybody has a different answer, and maybe you dig a little bit deeper. But you ask the same questions, so you have the same same process for everybody, and so that has been really helpful. And then also having a diverse interview committee, however, making sure you're not leaning too heavily on and tokenizing folks, because then they're in every single interview and nobody has that kind of time. So those have been really helpful to us, and reaching out to people, telling people you want them.
Thank you. Okay, so let's move on to our final speaker, Rachel Spraker. She's the Senior Director for Equity and Inclusive Excellence at the University of Virginia, and her title, her talk is Advancing Equity and Inclusion in the Workplace. So go ahead, Rachel.
Hi, thanks for letting me join you. And I hope no one asks me a question about what language I do any kind of work in, because I am not in any of the fields that you are, as may be evidenced by my title. I work mostly with academic programs, administrators, thinking about the ways in which we structure our systems. So maybe we can get into a little more specifics around some of those in terms of not just who and how we invite people to be in our organizations and our teams, but also thinking about what it feels like once you're there. I think there are a couple of things that Jackie said that I'll maybe pick up a little bit, but most of my work is focused on looking out at the representation in our workforce, and in particular aspects of it, to sort of identify those spaces where we're not tapping into the full potential of who could be there, who could be behind those systems, who could be setting up those infrastructures and selecting the problems that they're centered on, and centering, our resources and collective energy on, right? So I think I probably don't have to tell anyone in this space, right, that it actually matters who's behind these systems. So I won't belabor that point. I do think what's really interesting as we think about changing the demographics, the profile, perhaps even sometimes the purpose of our workforces, is that there's that old saying that you have to see something to be it, right? So I think frequently a lot of the work that we do, particularly when you talk about having interventions much earlier on, because in some ways it's sort of too late once you're getting to people at the end of their doctoral program or whatever it is, right? We've missed out on a lot of people being in the pathway to this work if we're only focused on what are we doing to set up MOUs with programs at the end of graduate school, right? So we have to be sort of thinking beyond the walls of our own horizon to create those opportunities for access, engagement, and passion for the field much, much earlier on, which I appreciate being invited with this group and having one of the founders of this particular group here at UVA with us, because I think it shows you the opportunities to, from a network, to think collectively about how do we actually reach different places much earlier on in the process. I think once we get to those things, a lot of what Jackie was talking about, which are things, you know, we think about, okay, how do you interrupt bias in a process, right? How do you interrupt those cognitive errors? You give yourself what Jackie was talking about, which is like a visual rubric. So you keep reminding yourself, I said we were looking for this. Let me make sure I'm actually measuring this thing that I said that I was looking for, as opposed to reading this person and identifying how warm I feel they are, how inviting I think they are, how much fun they'd be to, you know, have a drink with after we do this other big project or something like that. I think one of the major hurdles for us typically is that while you all are working in something that is networked globally, oftentimes, right? When you talk about human systems, we're actually talking about oftentimes processes where the insular nature of our people networks, who we know, how we know them, really limits sometimes the possibility of what we can, who we see as valuable to the work, what we see as valuable to the work. So one of the big hurdles is actually extending beyond our own sort of selves to get out there and connect with people. I also think there's something that was sort of mentioned before that we focus on a lot, and I'll just sort of say this, the component when you're thinking about diversity really of any kind, right? Because I'll start by saying, you know, we talk about diversity as the broadest range of possible human perspectives, conditions, experiences, right? So it's not just race, it's not just gender, even as it is those things. But as you think about that, what often is really important is just that concept of allyship. So if we want to promote gender diversity, it takes actually all of us recognizing how that is a benefit to what it is that we're doing, to that mission, and not just those individuals who show up as a minoritized or as a underserved or underrepresented group in a particular field, because it shifts, right? Our social context shifts and their dynamic. The sort of focus for us is really, you know, even if it's an identity I don't hold, how do I recognize that it's important to me that I show up for people across those differences, because of those differences, for the value that it brings to our work and the possibility that it brings to our work. So that's actually a lot of what we focus on. It oftentimes feels, when you're working particularly in very technical fields, it can be tough to have that conversation of, I really appreciate actually, Jackie, your story of you know, how you came to be, because you're sharing kind of in a vulnerable way, but an authentic way, you know, who you are, right? And making those just connections as people is really actually gonna do as much or more than lots of other things to sort of show people we don't come to this work just as one thing or the other. We're a complex set of identities, circumstances, geographies, backgrounds that we've come from, and showing up for each other, you know, to sort of, in allyship, even if I don't hold all of those identities, to think about the ways, not just that we open doors one or two times, but the ways in which we put structures in place that keep those doors open, right? That really sort of bring people with us in a view of being in, you know, partnership, in working together, and so sort of seeing our success and the success of others. So I think there's a lot that we sort of do that really tries to just get people to connect at a deeper level beyond just the level of the work at hand. I don't know if there's kind of other points we might get into, just some specifics if people want to. I think what the work I do at the university is really to be a thinking partner with people who are structuring hiring processes, structuring mentoring processes, structuring maybe even pipeline development type programs to think through some of those things. And what we typically talk through with them to start out with is really that a lot of the work of, if you think about just diversifying a workforce, it's really uncovering your choice points that you have day to day. So there's points where you get to make a choice about what you do. So who do I invite to my project? What projects do I work on? Who do I hire? What do I do to welcome new teammates? maybe even where do I show up in my local community to support access, whether that's in my K-12 system, whether that's working through a group like this in the post-secondary sort of place, those types of things. You know, your choice point of how do you educate yourself on allyship and sort of uncovering some of those hidden cultural expectations that are part of the field that others have sort of talked about. You know, I think one of the things that we sort of focus on in our work, because they oftentimes can feel like change happens very slowly. We're fighting a lot of inertia. But I sort of tell folks that we work with, I have a lot of faith in people. And maybe I'm overly naive or optimistic, but I actually have a lot of faith in people. And I do the work that I do in this space because I think organizations don't think and do. We, the people who make up organizations, actually think and do, which means that we can think and do differently, which is why I appreciate a group kind of connected like you all. You all are systems thinkers, right? Many of you. And so what I think is important is that you have the ability to apply some of that critical thinking to the social systems, right, that we're operating in, that are sort of circulating particular versions of the status quo, that we have the opportunity to challenge and say, why is it that way? Why are we seeing this? I mean, I know Laura was talking about her program was fairly diverse, but what is it that happens moving from the education program to the workforce, where then you're struggling with the social isolation, where there's maybe one woman or a couple folks of color, a couple Black people, a couple Latinx folks, you know, sort of on a team, that you move from that environment, that sort of conjunction point in education where it is very diverse. But then as you spread out, you find that less and less oftentimes, right? And I think the social isolation issue is very real. The book Jackie mentioned, if for any of you who are actually at UVA, we use it in a course that I teach. And so I have a bunch of copies of it if anyone wants to stop by and grab it. But I think there's definitely opportunities, really, if you just focus on where are those points that we have choice or power in a process. And that's what we focus on a lot, is helping to identify those for individuals or for organizations, and then to think through what would it look like if we made a different choice than what's kind of always been done. So I'll just stop there. I don't know that there's anything in particular. I'm happy to talk about any specific questions that folks have.
All right, well, thank you, Rachel. We definitely have time for specific questions for Rachel, and then after that, we will open it up to general questions. So if anyone has a question, please, I see a hand.
I have a question around, so Rachel, you were talking about making choices and, where we have power to make choices, and Eric's question when he asked, what is getting worse? As I was listening to the talks, I was thinking about how, we are seeing more diverse representation of minoritized populations, women, marginalized groups represented in HPC. And I think it was Lara, apologies for that mispronunciation. I talk about the engagement piece, and there are these soft skills, or you call them professional skills, that are often brought in when you have people who might be not as traditionally represented, and these people who build things like this group, right? They bring in engagement, increase retainment of folks, and help people gain skills and build their network. From my experience, it's not paid work, and I feel like that is somewhere where really we could work on, is recognizing these folks who make it a better place to be. It's kind of like, oh, this person does extra and they're really great and we love them, but they're not rewarded or promoted for it in a monetary way or in a titled way. I was just kind of curious, Rachel, if you could comment on, what you see happening in that space, and where you see the work being done. Is it rewarded? Is it promotable?
So I'll say a couple of things. I think there are spaces where we see that coming into, just standard, not so much just what work gets done, but how does it get done, being measured as a part of the sort of, this is what it means to show up, with excellence in your role. So we see that whether it's in academia or elsewhere, right? And you see a lot of it, you see it more frequently these days in academia, but that sort of space of having as a part of your performance evaluation, right? The sort of how you go about doing your work, how you make people feel, where you invest your time and energy in building those other types of connections, actually coming as a formal part of the performance process sometimes shows up, right? So that's one way to have it sort of baked in. And I think a lot of people, we focus on competencies, right? So you talked about it as soft skills, but what are those intercultural competencies that make these collaborations possible? Because I think a lot of people have this assumption that, particular types of technical or any kind of work happens with like just one person sitting in front of something, just like chugging away for like a long time. But you all know it's a team effort, which means you deal with people, you deal with other people, which means you have to understand, to have some curiosity, to have some cultural awareness, to have some ability to negotiate conflict, and also to see conflict not as always a negative, but to see conflict as the fact that multiple different ideas are circulating in a space, which is what we need to make better decisions and do those types of things. So, so we do see people baking in kind of those expectations of not just technical competencies when I'm hiring or when I'm measuring performance, but also those intercultural competencies, those behaviors that promote collaboration and colleagueship, right? We see that being built in. Now, academia is probably one of the worst places for actually valuing the service of anyone, but in particularly people who bear, sometimes it's called the minority tax, whether it's for women or racialized minorities. In, I work at an institution that's going into its third century. We weren't desegregated until the 70s. We weren't integrated on the basis of gender until the 70s fully, right? So it's like, we have a long history up until this time that has informed our organization and informed our field, which means that there's a lot that we're fighting. I guess fighting is a very potentially bad term, but that we're trying to stand up against, right? So there's a lot of inertia against that and against changing what we value or changing why we do certain things. So I'm not sure in the field I'm in, I've always seen that work as effectively as I might hope. And I do think that climate is something that is just really important to be paying attention to, no matter what type of organization you're in, of how do we reward the whole of what someone is bringing, as opposed to just these sort of key components, because it's oftentimes very much harder to measure how you make people feel and how you show up in social relations than what you produce as an end product on a timeline for a particular project. So it's hard. And that's why it's like those choice points of how do we have a system that actually rewards that formally is something to think about. And there are a lot of different ways. I'm sorry I took too long.
No, that's great. All right, I think we'll just open it up to a general discussion if people would like to. All right, there's a question from the chat. To all speakers, what would you have done differently? And this is from Jackie Huben. So if any one of you want to tackle that, or multiple. Anything you would have done differently in your career?
One of the things that I would have done differently is everybody knows what you're bad at. So you can just stop hiding it and work with people who are good at those things, or just say, hey, I need your support. So for example, when I became a new manager, it was my first time managing people, really scary thing. And you kind of think that you need to do everything right. And one of the things that I did was, hey, I really need your support. We're going to have to work together. I know I was promoted. I know you've been, this person was here longer than me. And I just said, if we support each other, we're going to get through this a lot better. It changed everything. And so that's one thing, is it's okay to be bad at some things. And if you're bad at something, it means you're doing something new and challenging yourself. It's a good thing.
Thank you. Lara or Rachel, do you have something to say about that?
I mean, so I've had a short career to date, but I think the thing that I have learned through most of this is in a similar sort of vein, is that people, they don't expect you to know everything, and we put a lot of expectations on ourselves to be good at things, and to be sort of up to scratch with everything, but just to accept that, you know, you're not, so you don't have to be good at things, and people don't expect you to be very good at things, and that you can ask for an explanation, and that you can ask again for the same explanation if it didn't land properly the first time. I think that's something that I really still to this day struggle with, is just to yeah, accept that there's a lot to know in this field, and that you're not expected to know it all, and most of the time people are very willing to contribute and to share and to guide you in the direction that you need to go. So yeah.
There's another question. I don't know, Rachel, if you wanted to address that. Okay, there's another question from the chat to Jackie or senior ones here. How do you see the future of HPC, expanding, shrinking, or changing directions?
I think it's going everywhere in all different directions. It's only expanding. And I think that it really depends on where the needs are. And I think if we have the workforce to support it, it is going to grow as fast as we can support it. And I think the limitation is the support workforce, the system admins, the people who help people use it, the people who run it, the people who understand, and right now, you know, how fast they can make chips. So it's, you know, I really do think it's limited by the workforce, but I think the possibilities are endless. And that's why we need to keep expanding the workforce, because there's so much to learn. You know, as Lara mentioned, this is a field where there's so much and we can't know it all. And but if we can build our workforce, it's pretty exciting. I think it's, you know, it's really exciting.
So Gladys has a question.
Yes, and this question, my brain is aching here, because I want to hear from the panelists, but also from the audience. And you know, this involves all of us and the day-to-day things that we do. And I would like to know what are the things, the actionable things that we can do in our day-to-day as individuals to contribute to diversity in the workplace. How, and especially right now, you know, we are in this setting that we are connected online, right? We don't see each other face to face that often. So how do we do that? What are the things that we can do, you know, that I can wake up tomorrow and say, okay, this is one thing that I can do to make my workplace, regardless of the setting, a better place for anyone?
Gladys, I don't want to hijack your question, but I have a very similar question. Maybe we can add together. I was just thinking that so far I've heard today, outreach and opportunities seem to be the biggest key things. Are we missing anything else that perhaps goes into what Gladys is talking about?
Well, one thing I would just mention is actually listening, like talking to and listening to people. So just doing that one person outreach to say, talk to me about your, just like Jackie said, your journey to here. What was important for you? What's important for you now? Where do you see those next steps? And actually getting to know people, like whether that's your organization or through associations like this, like reaching out to one other person that you see in the participant list from this group and just asking that question of, you know, what's been your journey and what's been supportive for you, to start hearing from people to understand what those things are, no matter who you are, right? That's one way to just start making those connections and proactively trying to address what can sometimes be social isolation, because it can also be isolating for people who don't hold a minoritized identity to be maybe the only voice in a room speaking up for the importance of that, even, right? Who are allies. So I think talking and figuring out making connections to break across some of that social isolation would be one thing to start with.
Interesting. I have an additional question. We were talking, Rachel, specifically, you had mentioned something that's sort of, I think about a lot recently, which is that if we're engaging people at PhD level, it is way too late. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, they pretty much have their course sets. So does anyone else do anything in, sort of maybe the early undergrad or even high school outreach in their area? And what form does that take? I'm just not aware of anyone else just because I'm ignorant of it.
For undergrad outreach opportunities, we hire a lot of undergrads, and then we try to bring them in if we can, if we have a position available. But it is hard to get, so it's hard to line that up perfectly when the budget is right and we have an open position. But that's one way that we do outreach. We also have visited high schools, but nothing formal or ongoing, but we do support, say, for example, our astrophysics department does high school and REU programs, and so we support those as well.
Yeah.
And
So
I would say, oh, go ahead.
you can go. I'll go next.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, I think that's important, right? I grew up in rural Virginia, so I don't know if people know much about that, but it's like a school system that, HPC, even today, I imagine, is not a career opportunity that very many people of any variety from where I grew up would have. I think, sorry if I'm mispronouncing, you mentioned the sort of, how do you even have a pathway to see what this is? One of the things that excites you is it feels kind of like it's this sort of unknown thing behind the scenes, kind of going on. And that's why I started with sometimes we have to see it to be it, to even imagine that possibility for ourselves. How will we ever even get exposed that that's sort of a possibility? So I appreciate the question, Eric. And I think it's something for others to really be thinking about of how do we kind of make those connections earlier on? Sorry, go ahead.
No, so I was just going to bring it back. I mean, I mentioned the student cluster competition. So that is 80 to 100 undergraduate students every year who go through the program, and that's a good start. We also have a number of school outreach where we have well, not currently in functioning, but a mini pie cluster where we should sort of demonstrate basic examples of how clusters work, and just aiming to reach for the younger, I think, is very important. And putting time and effort into brainstorming ways to do that, I think, is also very important. And just in sort of just bringing me back to the last question a little bit, is that the previous question is that I think that the best way to improve anything is just to have conversations like this and to improve visibility, and whether it's individuals who are paying diversity tax within these institutions standing up and saying, hi, this is me, I'm one of the, I'm helping the Diversity Act, or whether it's individuals who are not part of minority groups, but just having the conversations and talking about it and creating visibility for the problems that we face, and asking for input from not necessarily only people within the field, but from people from outside the field on ideas on how they think that we can improve diversity and visibility of our very sort of niche field.
All right, well, thank you. So we're at 2:00. I believe Gladys would like to announce some things coming up in the future, or I can.
Go ahead, Eric, please.
All right, so this is the calendar that Gladys put up for the next 3 events. There's a mailing list. Hopefully, if you're interested, even if you want to come to some of the meetings, please join in the mailing list so you know what's coming up. We really encourage people to share their ideas and get involved with the group. And I also wanted to mention that in the chat, there's a lot of good comments and other. I found the book title that Jackie was talking about, put it in the chat, and other people have suggested other things to read. So that could be useful for other people. So with that, I thank all 3 speakers, Jackie, Lara, and Rachel. Thank you very much for participating.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
For being here. Really a great conversation that gives us a lot of information of, things that we want to continue focusing on our next events. And please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. We are, once again, 6 institutions that we are now working together at the state of Virginia. And so anyone else that would like to join our team, please just reach out and we'll be happy to have you.
Okay, with that, have a nice day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.